many of you are going to remember Russ Eanes. We interviewed him back in, I think, September of 2021 it was, Russ. So welcome back to the Camino Cafe. Everyone loved the last episode we did together. So welcome back.
Thanks, Leigh. I'm very glad to be back with you.
Oh, well, thank you. And I'm thrilled to have you back because you have a new book out. So maybe you might want to show the cover of the new one.
I never thought that I'd be an author of books, and now I have two, and I have about four more in my head that I've started or want to work on. Yes. So it's been a new career for me.
Well, yeah. And so the new book, we should mention the title for anyone that's just listening. That is Pilgrim Paths to Assisi, 300 miles on the way of San Francis. So we will get to talk about all of that in a few moments. You were just featured in a major national publication, so I think we should mention that as well. So maybe just say a little blurb about what happened there, because I think that kind of touches on what you're doing and how you're an author now.
It does. And I was in the New York Times, to my surprise. I never planned that. But it's kind of like when you walk the Camino and connections happen and you just like, oh, how did that happen? This is sort of like that, teeny bit more planning, but in the sense that several years ago, after I left my work, after I walked the Camino, the next year I joined a career group of people that were older, thinking about what to do with their life. And that was Mark Miller and Career Pivot. And through Mark Miller, I just met a wide network of people, led me to other work, other relationships with work relationships. And one of them was another Mark Miller. They're both got the same name. One spells it with a C, one with a K. The Mark Miller with a K got to know me. He does finance stuff for the New York Times. And anybody that's in your 60s knows that you think a lot about finances, Social Security, Medicare. And he wanted to talk to me about how I've done my post-career alternative retirement. And for me, it's been with my business with the Walker Press, and then also through writing my books and helping people self-publish like this. So I was really pleased. He wanted to interview me. I was surprised that the feature came out the way it did, and I'm really happy. It's I'm using it to open doors to other things because I really want to continue to write and talk to other people about the kinds of things I'm doing, because a lot of folks in their 60s have a sense that, hey, my life's not over by a long shot. This old career or whatever life events that I was building toward, they're past. What do I do now? And for some of it's another 20 or 30 years. And anyway, for me, it's an adventure. All of life's an adventure. And if you don't see it that way, then you might be missing something.
Yeah, well, I'll include a link to that article because I think it's a very inspiring article, and I think folks will be interested in reading it. Well, it seems to me that you and Jane have definitely proven, your wife, you and Jane have definitely proven that the pivot worked. You guys are doing all kinds of fun things. And not only did you walk the Camino de Santiago, but you then wrote a book about it. And then you decided to do something different. And so let's jump into that. How did this book come about?
Yes. So walked the Camino Frances in 2018, a 20-year dream finally realized. Came back, figured out that maybe one of the ways to process that experience was to write about it. That idea turned into a book, which turned into be a very successful book. It's sold really, really well, and just gets me in contact with lots of people like you, Leigh, and many walkers, because I really want to inspire other people. Try it, do it. And after we finished in Spain, we said, I've always had a lifelong interest in St. Francis, and I knew about the way of St. Francis. And I'd gotten to know Sandy Brown, who kind of pioneered it in a sense for English speakers, Americans, with his guidebook. And so we said, let's go to Italy. We've never been to Italy for our next trek. And so in 2019, we took 2 weeks to walk to Assisi from the city of Rieti. It's north of Rome. We kind of walked against the direction of the guidebooks. So it was a fun experiment, especially when your cell phone doesn't know where you are and you're trying to use GPX tracks on a poorly marked trail. But anyway, and then the plan was, hey, I like this so much, maybe I'll write a book about this because no one's written a book about this. And I was going to go back in May of 2020 to Italy. And if you just crank your mind back 3 years, May of 2020, Italy was like, after China, the epicenter of the pandemic. And that didn't happen. So 2 entire years went by before we could go back and walk more of the way of St. Francis. And we did that last spring. We walked the most challenging portion. And we put that into the book. And then I went back in September to walk the last little section from Rome to Rieti that I'd never walked. And that was an interesting experience. Met another pilgrim along the way, discovered all sorts of interesting things that I didn't know existed in that part of Italy, and learned a whole lot more about St. Francis. And that all went in the book, the experiences. And a couple people that read it already, it just out said, "Oh, it makes me want to go walk it." And I said, "Okay, then I've succeeded in the book. If you want to go walk it, that's why I wrote the book."
Yeah. Well, I've only read a couple of chapters and I'm hooked. And then I watched a presentation that you did, which I'll have a link in the show notes to that as well. I mean, the photos are gorgeous, and we'll have a couple of here coming up for those watching on video. And always, anyone listening via an audio podcast, know if you want to attach a face to a name, to a voice, jump right on over to our YouTube channel and you can check out what Russ looks like and get a better idea of maybe some of the photos that we're going to be sharing later. So let's back up just a little bit. I'm familiar with Francis, but maybe for someone who is not familiar with him, can you just give us a little bit of an introduction as to why someone should be interested in walking this?
One of the beauties of this path is, while there's guidebooks written to walk from Florence to Rome, the point of the way of St. Francis, it connects places of significance in his life. And he spent most of his life between Rome and Florence. And he's from Umbria, which is the central Italy. And they connect all these incredible places of stories of his life, places he visited, places miraculous or whatever events happened, fantastic events happened. And you can actually start anywhere and walk anywhere. So if you got 2 weeks, you can start in one place. I always recommend people end up in the Assisi. It's mystical, magical, spiritual, medieval. It's kind of time. You feel like time stands still there. Francis of Assisi lived from 1181 or 1182 to 1226 and started a movement, which he did not intend to do. He just wanted to follow the gospel, follow Jesus, fell in love with God, and gave up everything. The key principles of the Franciscan movement is personal poverty. So he gave up possessions. A long story about breaking with his family. It's all in the book. It's many biographies written about it. The movie Brother, Sun, Sister, Moon tells it in a certain way. And so I've been always interested in him personally. And he is probably the most widely respected religious figure in history. Why do I say most widely respected? Because he's respected by people from other traditions that are not Christian.
Okay.
And that's partly because of his nonviolence, because his emphasis on peace, and his generous, gracious spirit toward others. So when they tried to have an ecumenical meeting a few decades ago with world religious leaders, the only place they could agree to meet was Assisi.
Amazing.
Not Rome, not Mecca, not anywhere else. It was Assisi. And St. Francis threatens no one. And so I wanted to go understand well, I can read about him. I can decide I believe or don't believe legends, but what was his country like? What was it like to walk the places he walked? And that's what led us to go there.
Wonderful. So a lot of people that will be listening to our show are familiar with the Camino de Santiago, probably the Camino Frances, which was your last book was about that. So I wonder if you could just maybe speak to a little bit that if somebody has walked the Camino Frances, say they started in Saint Jean and made their way all the way to Santiago, how would that compare to walking, say, from Florence to Rome when it comes to a physical exertion level?
Yeah, it's a lot more physically demanding. So when you want to walk the Camino, the way of St. Francis, do not look at the distances. First, look at the elevation chart. So anyone who's walked the Camino Frances and has walked over the Pyrenees the first day or two, when you're walking between Florence and Assisi, so you're walking through the Apennines, you're going through mountains. It's like that day after day. It's beautiful, inspiring, wonderful, but challenging. And I tell people, if you thought that you could do 20 or 25 kilometers on the Camino Frances, think in terms of like 10 to 15 kilometers on the way of St. Francis. And that's especially between Florence and Assisi. That's going north to south. Now, when you're starting from Rome, it's not as physically challenging, but you're always going up and down. I think there are maybe about 4 stages out of 28 They're flat. The
Mm.
rest are all up and down hills. Again, beautiful. Italy is full of these hilltop towns and cities, and you're going to want to go in them and stay there and eat in them and sleep in them and poke your nose in churches and other places, Roman ruins, Etruscan ruins, whatever you find.
Yeah.
But so it's a lot more challenging. There is not the infrastructure like the Camino Frances has. It's not an ancient pilgrimage route, even though the routes you're walking on are ancient.
Mhm.
So, and some things are different, like you need to book your lodging a day or two in advance at least. You
Okay.
mostly can't just show up
Okay.
right now.
Is that because
So
it's also tourist destinations or just a lack of availability?
it's both. So when
Okay.
you are going into a mountain town in Italy, anyone that drives up can stay there. I think my wife and I stayed in together 2 or 3 pilgrim only lodgings. Now there are more than that, but they're not that many. Otherwise, someone that wants to drive up and stay in the refugio and go hiking in the mountains for 3 days in different directions has a room just like you
Okay.
in a dormitory. So that's just
So
one
it's
thing.
not
And
just pilgrims. Okay.
it's not just pilgrims, and they just want you to call ahead. They may not be there. They may not have the staffing there. If you show up at 3 o'clock, no one might be there.
Okay.
And so, and there's a wide range of accommodations, hostels, hotels, refugios, agriturismo, which are like working farms that have rooms. My wife and I like the adventure of all these places. I've stayed in a couple of monasteries with
Mm.
mixed experiences. So I've stayed in pilgrim only hostels. Uh, there are not the types of albergues like on the Camino that are dedicated and you bring your sleeping bag and unroll and get a bed and a shower. There are those, but for example, almost every place we stayed in had sheets and towels. So
Yeah.
that's one less thing you don't have to carry.
Yeah, that's a good thing. So if we're looking at the path that's from Florence to Assisi, you say it's pretty challenging, maybe lower the mileage in comparison to what you might do on the Camino de Santiago. What about the paths? Is it a variety of roads, variety of, actual paths? Are there a lot of rocky spots? What was your experience like?
It's all of that. Some are on
Okay.
roads, some are rocky trails. People that have walked sections of the Camino Frances will know these rocky trails that in a rainstorm double as a stream. They have those. Some are blacktopped. A lot of it was linking together Italian hiking club trails in the beginning,
Mm.
and those already existed. So you'll see the CAIs, their shorthand, a red and white blaze on trees, routes marked. And since I went in 2019 till today, I've noticed the signage has gotten a lot better. You
Okay.
actually can walk parts of it without any kind of, GPX tracks on your phone is really handy. But with a guidebook, I think you can get most of it. But I recommend anyone have GPX tracks because there are also shortcuts you can decide on, and the
Oh.
GPX tracks will help you keep on my wife and I some days were like, we're a little tired. We think we're not going to do the long cut up into the mountains. We just want to get there sooner. So the GPX tracks help.
What do you mean when you say that? I don't know if I'm familiar with GPS
Okay. So
tracks.
that's on your phone.
Uh-huh.
Tracks that someone records a track on a phone, and it's got
Oh,
it on a map. And there's Guru Maps and there's Gaia are the 2 most popular here in the US. There's others.
okay.
And your phone always knows where you are on the face of the earth, even if you put it in airplane mode,
Right.
turn off your data. And so if you download the maps offline and then have them on your phone, it'll find where you are. And you can tell whether you're coming to a junction. You can tell, do I go left? Do I go right? Have I missed the turn? When I walked the Camino Frances, I didn't have anything like that. I still wouldn't want it. So a guy like me, kind of heads somewhere else, like, wait a minute, all those pilgrims in front of me are gone. There's no one behind me. I missed a turn. And you turn around
Right.
and walk back.
Right.
The way of St. Francis is like that, but there just aren't as many pilgrims.
No, you're right about there's typically a pilgrim in front of you or behind you, and it's really well marked at this point, especially the Frances, right? So you can get lost if you're not paying attention, but it's a little more difficult to get
It's
lost.
hard to get lost.
Yeah, yeah. So if you had to talk about your favorite day when you think about this path from Florence to Rome, which again, I'm just using that as an example because you said you can start and stop anywhere you want, but what are your favorite places on this path?
Oh, good question. My wife and I really liked walking between Gubbio and Assisi. It's about 3 days.
Okay.
And it's walking through Umbria. So Umbria is
Mm.
called the Green Heart of Italy. And it's vineyards, olive groves, vineyards and olive groves, vineyards and olive groves, and mountains and castles and monasteries. And it's twisting up and down around curves over little streams. There's just a new adventure around every corner, and it's just delightful.
Mm.
That's where we stayed in one of our favorite places. It's called San Pietro in Vigneto, which is an old monastery, a Benedictine monastery that is now run by the Confraternity of St. James in Italy. So they have an albergue on the Camino Frances. It's after you get, it's near Fromista. It's right alongside the road. They do a foot washing. Anybody that knows that albergue will understand what I'm talking about. They also run two in Italy, and this is one of them. And it's just gorgeous scenery, gorgeous, very relaxing pace. And it's not that challenging. I mean, as you go up and down hills, there's a lot of elevation by the end of the day, but it's not just a steep mountain. That section, those 3 days, walking into Assisi and then arriving at Assisi is just incredible. And anybody going, I encourage you, take 2 extra days in Assisi. There's so much to see between the Basilica of St. Francis, the Basilica of St. Clare, and just the city. It's touristy, but not tiresome is the way I like to say it. You don't feel overwhelmed by the tourists. You can find corners to go to that are not as touristy as others. And it's just really nice.
Mm-hmm. How was the food along the way?
Well, if you like Italian food, you better indulge in it. I like to go into a town and to a restaurant and say, what is your favorite, or what is your specialty? What is your daily specialty? And they'll bring it to you. Usually it's pasta, but it's, the Italians have 4-course meals, and some of the refugios you stay in, they give you breakfast and supper, and I think 2 of the refugios we were in these are like mountain huts is a really bad way to say it. They're like rooms in homes or a mountain inn that have full services. And that's how you hike from town to town in Europe in the mountains. These huts, huts is really a bad term. Inns is a little bit better. We had some of our best meals in those places. Someone giving you the local food. I don't even know what some of them were called. It was just really delicious. And always, like in Spain, always some wine. But the local foods are I have to put up a blog post sometime of all my favorite restaurants along the way of St. Francis, because people are always asking, where's a good place to stop?
Oh, yeah.
I can tell a few bad places to stop, but mostly just many wonderful meals.
Oh, my mouth's watering right now just thinking about it. Did you find walking this particular path one where you would maybe have to picnic at lunch? Are there stops along the way where you can get food, or are you carrying most of your food for the day?
It's both. I would say there are at least a half a dozen or 8 places along there where you really need to bring some food for lunch, partly because you can't always guarantee if you walk in an Italian village at the right time that the bar is open. So like in Spain, they have, the quote unquote bar, which is the cafe. And because of the pilgrim traffic in Spain, there's almost always one of those open in a town. Again, I remember walking the Camino Frances and walking into, is it Reliegos, and like everything was shut at 11. Who knows? That happened more than once. But in Italy, it might be a little more common. And their restaurants are open. The trattoria, the osteria are open between 11:30 and 2. So if you happen to show up in a village at like 2:30, there might only be a bar or cafe, and if it's closed. So you can plan that. There's supermarkets and grocers, and the guidebooks will say, pack a lunch this day. And if you're staying at an agriturismo or a refugio or somewhere, or a hostel that serves food, you can ask in advance, could you pack a lunch for me? And we did that. And then you have a nice picnic.
That's so nice. So if someone's listening right now and they're contemplating maybe they've already done the Camino de Santiago and the Frances. Maybe they've done the Portuguese route, or maybe the Camino Norte. And they're sitting here hearing this and thinking, maybe I should try this one in Italy. What would you say to them if they were to ask, I've already done this one, should I give Italy a try?
I'd say go for it.
Yeah.
It's different. You'll have a different experience. You won't have a large community of pilgrims. So it's good if you walk with a friend, or a spouse, or both. I walk with my spouse, and then the one time I went solo, I found a friend along the way. It's in the book. I was waiting out a rainstorm in front of a grocery store, and my doppelganger was across the porch waiting out the rain too. A guy named Ed from Holland. I walked with him for 4 days. So, so I'd say get a guidebook. There's 2 really good guidebooks out there. And I always tell anyone that wants to walk, start by getting guidebooks. There's 2 excellent guidebooks, Sandy Brown's with Cicerone Press, and the brand new one by Matt Harms with Village to Village Press. And they'll give you an idea of everything from, the towns, villages, where to stay, lists of lodging. There are also a lot of online resources, and there's an excellent Facebook group for this. It's probably the most polite Facebook group I've ever been a part of.
We love polite Facebook groups.
I know. It's really a polite group. You can ask a question and people will just give you a nice answer. Very helpful. There is no other forum for it. So start with that to get an idea of the route and pick a section to walk. My wife and I said we have 2 weeks. Now, if you have 5 weeks, you could walk the whole thing in one go. That's good. If you want to walk it over 2 weeks, there's several options. You could walk from Florence to Assisi. You can also do what I did, which is walk from either Rome or Rieti to Assisi. I really, really am a bit partial to that route because it's a little bit less physically challenging, and you'll see some spectacular towns like Spoleto, Trevi, Spello, Rieti along the way, and you'll never forget it. So I think many pilgrims we're like me, where you take 6 weeks, you may not be able to do that again. So maybe you have 2 or 3 weeks. Well, the Camino Frances has lots of options for you.
Right. Wonderful. So now you are offering tours. I've been seeing on Facebook, and you're doing that with Sandy Brown's tour company. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yes,
Sandy's been on the show. So Sandy's another favorite here at Camino Cafe Podcast.
Yep. Sandy is great. Sandy has got Pilgrim Paths, and he does tours, various pilgrimage routes in Europe. And he asked me to host his tour from Florence to Assisi in September. And then Sandy and I are working on a tour to go from Rieti and then take a bit of a detour to several sanctuaries to Assisi next spring. And
okay, so in 24.
In 24, yes.
Because this next one coming up is already sold out.
That one's already sold out. Yes, that's limited to 12, and probably the other one will be limited to 12. That's probably a good size for a group to limit it at.
Yeah. Now, one of the things I think people really love about your book and about you as a person is these principles that you walk with. But I think they're a lot more than that, based on our talks in the past, that they're principles of your life. And you've added to that list since your last book. So I just wonder if you could kind of speak to that if someone hasn't heard the last episode or they haven't yet had the chance to read either of your books. Could you talk about the principles and maybe a few that really mean the most to you?
Well, yeah, good to bring that up. So people get scared when they hear principles because they think of a principled person as maybe someone you don't want to talk to. And I think of it rather as guidelines. And I don't know why the 7 principles came to me that I had for walking the Camino Frances. It was just like one of those moments. Yeah. And what I did was I've sort of modified the list. Some of them are gone for my expanded list of 12, but they've come out of my experience in walking pilgrimages. And to me, pilgrimage and touring are very different. Tourism, for one thing, pilgrimage has much more of an intentionality about it, and might be, and to have it be a bit difficult is really important. So I took that original list of 7 and I dropped a few because, I decided that maybe it didn't matter to walk the whole way anymore. And the way of St. Francis, you may not be able to walk the whole way. My wife and I discovered that from the very first time to last time. Sometimes just practically you can't. When we were there last spring, there were some storms up in the mountains,
Mm,
and they made it might be difficult. You might get stuck up there. And it's not like being stuck on the Camino Frances where you're 5 kilometers from a village or there's traffic going by. You might be stuck and nobody knows who you are, where you are. So
mm,
we took a bus a couple times just because it seemed prudent. But we missed walking it. But that's just the way it has to go on occasion. So like things like walking it the whole way, I've dropped that.
okay.
But things like keeping your pack light, I still have, and that's just a great life principle. And I live just 25 miles, by the way, from the Appalachian Trail, and I'm really kind of gotten interested in that. Didn't used to be, but I keep meeting through walkers, and I'm like, this looks interesting. I don't know if I'm ever going to do it, but they have the same thing. They need to keep their pack light. But one of the things that I think is an important principle that I developed my first Camino, my first pilgrimage that I have really focused on is in my new book. It's principle number 4: accept whatever's offered you as a gift from God. I've
Mm,
realized that, I don't know, other cultures aren't the same, but in America, we don't like admitting that we need help.
mhm,
It's famously said, men won't ask for directions. Well, a lot of us won't want to admit that we're hungry, lost, tired, scared. And I have a principle that I developed from walking before I left to go to Spain in 2018 to today, that if somebody offers me something, just accept it. Somebody offers to pay the check at a restaurant, don't argue.
mm,
Now, conversely, we can also do the same thing for others. We can offer gifts and give things to others, and we don't like to be turned down if we're offering a gift. But I've really learned to be attentive. And sometimes those are some of the most important connections in life, are things that come to you unexpected. And so that goes along with principle number 5, which is walk in expectation of the unexpected.
I love that one.
We tend to live lives that are scheduled. We're not only walking from here, or just, going out on an errand in the car to the store or to some meeting, and we're planning what's going to happen after that. And someone's maybe emailed us, and our minds are all wrapped up in communication, and we're not where we are right at that moment. We're somewhere else, some other time. And I've discovered that if I let go of that stuff, both in life and on the trail, walk in expectation, unexpected, then we see the things. They might just pass us by. And we really need to look for those things. So that's one that I just loved. And it's again, when your life is tightly scheduled, it's really hard to be looking for the unexpected things and then be able to drop things when they come to you. By the way, some of my principles came from ideas from the book The Art of Pilgrimage by Phil Cousino.
Mm,
He opened my mind to see some of these things. But another one is accept your limitations, and that is really important. And that my friend who was over last night, my neighbor, sorry, who walked the Camino, was sharing about her experience, and she injured her knee. She didn't expect that to happen, and she was really frustrated that she had to take a taxi one day. And I said, that's just accepting your limitations. My wife and I have discovered that in Italy, it's pushed our limitations more than we would have ever thought, especially
mm,
climbing mountains.
yeah.
And when you get older, that should be wisdom to accept our limitations. But it's just accepting that this is where I am in life. This is right now. This is the way things are. And when you're walking on a pilgrimage, that's something that often happens. The limitations come up. So, and I'll just mention one more, number 8,
Okay.
greet and take interest in other pilgrims, offer them something
Mm,
if they need it. And
yeah.
this one, I kind of had this in mind before I went. And so I said, before I go to Italy next time, this was like a year ago, my wife and I went first. I said, I'm going to meet every pilgrim I'm going to say hello to. And then, so we did that. My wife's very outgoing. She loves to talk to people. And so we did that, and we just found all sorts of interesting conversations. There aren't a lot of pilgrims. So if you're sitting in a restaurant in a town and there's only 2 other pilgrims and they walk into the same restaurant, see if they'll like to sit at your table with you.
Yes.
But I did that when I went back in September for 2 weeks to walk the last stretch I had never not walked. And I did the crazy thing. I landed in Rome, took the train to St. Peter's, and I started walking that day. Most people are like, why weren't you flat out in a hotel sleeping? I was like, well, you get enough espresso, you can pretty much do anything. Uh, but my third day out, I saw this other pilgrim. I'm waiting out a rainstorm in front of a big grocery store. If you've been in Europe, the Co-op is a big supermarket chain. And I got my lunch in the Co-op and it was heavily raining and I wasn't going to leave yet. So I waited. I saw another guy over there with a pack on his back. I said, well, there's another pilgrim. I mean, he might've been going the other way. I didn't know anything. So I went and I talked to him and turned out he was my age. He just retired. He was out walking. He was going to stay in the same place I was that night. I said, well, let's walk together. And we became friends and walked for several days. And it was all because I greeted that other pilgrim. I could have said, well, I want to walk alone. I want to be by myself.
Right.
And so anyway, I'd had that principle to greet other pilgrims, especially, and when I walked in the Camino de Santiago, I started that at the bus station in Bayona. So many of us that have come from Paris on the train, you end up in Bayona and there's a bus station, train station. And I was waiting there. The train wasn't running that evening, so they put us on a bus. And I just started seeing all these people with packs. So I said, I'll go introduce myself. And wouldn't you know it, 4 or 5 of them that I met that night, I saw all the way along, not like every day, but they would pop up. Oh, there's Alan, there's Teresa, there's, Charlie, including seeing them at the very end, including ones that are still friends. So take a chance to meet other pilgrims. Even if you're walking with someone, do that.
Yes, totally agree. So it's wonderful meeting people. And especially when people are on their own, at a meal, it's so nice to invite them to join you. We all like to connect when we're out walking. So it's a wonderful principle to have. Oh, I love all those. And if you want to know more about those, please pick up one of Russ's books. You can do so on Amazon. I will have the links in the show notes. And if you want to get to know him, guess what? You have a way to get to know him if you live close enough to him. He's in the beautiful Shenandoah Valley. And you just started a chapter for American pilgrims on the Camino. So I just wonder if you'd maybe just give a shout out about that for a moment in case someone's listening and they live in that area.
Yes. So the American Pilgrims on the Camino is all over the U.S. and we have local chapters. And I could never get to my local chapter meeting because it's up in D.C. about 2 hours, and then they might be an hour away from there. I live in hiking heaven. I mean, straight ahead of me, looking off the deck here is the Allegheny Mountains, just 6 miles away, and the other direction of the Blue Ridge Mountains, 20 miles away. And there's places to hike in between. So a friend, you can't start it with a spouse. So I wasn't going to start it with my wife. They won't let you do that. They discourage that, I should say.
Okay.
So another friend who'd walked, Donna Mast, we were cutting up something in a kitchen one day, and she said, I wish we had a local group. I said, I wish we had one too. I wish we could start one. She goes, well, let's start one. So it's not an easy process. It takes time. I think it took us about 6 months to get started up and approved, but we have about 70 people on our email list, and we do hikes together every month, and we have potlucks, and we have information meetings. I think the next one we're going to do is how to choose a pack. Maybe get someone from our local outfitter store to help people figure out how to get a pack. Okay. So anyway, it's a great experience. I think people that have walked the Camino, they're like, how do I explain this experience to anyone? Well, find a local chapter and you'll be a bunch of people that either are dreaming it or they've done it. They will understand you. Exactly.
And they want to hear your stories, right? Our families might get tired of them, but folks that have walked want to hear the stories, or more so want to have their story heard, right? So it's a great opportunity to join. Well, wow, we're going to have links galore in these show notes. So many things, the books, the tours, the local chapter, maybe some of the other information you mentioned, and there's some guidebooks. We'll get Sandy's guidebook on there as well as a few others. So thank you so much, Russ, for coming back to the Camino Cafe podcast. You are always welcome here. We love talking with you. Your books are great. And even more importantly, I think your stories are fantastic. And the principles that you're sharing with us are just great things to use, not only on pilgrimage, but in life.
Thanks a lot, Leigh. I am thrilled to be here.
Well, thank you. And we will have all this stuff in the show notes. So thank you everyone for checking in, and be sure to check out Russ's last episode if you are planning a walk on the Camino de Frances, and you'll find a lot of information during that interview. So I'll have a link to that as well as all the others. So take care, everyone. Until next time, we will see you on Camino.
Las cosas